Eskom is facing a backlash following its exemption from declaring irregular and fruitless expenditure. This applies until the 2024-25 financial year. Some believe this will aid further corruption at the power utility. Treasury, which also is facing the backlash, argues it will help Eskom's credit outlook. Let's get more reaction now to this. I'm joined by Analyst Khaya Sithole. Khaya, thank you very much for your time here on eNCA. So Treasury is saying that, exempting Eskom from the PFMA, essentially, or parts of it in this way, in the way that they've gazetted, will help minimize pressure on the fiscus and its borrowing power. Do you believe this?
Good afternoon to the viewers. No, I do not believe that will actually materialize. What has happened here is that historically, how the audit process relating to Eskom and other state-owned enterprises is that it audits the financial information, which is designed according to international financial reporting standards, and then it also audits compliance with the PFMA. In the compliance with the PFMA, the exemption has then said, look, for this 2 or 3 year period, we will then simply say that these financial statements must not be qualified simply on the basis of non-compliance with the PFMA. The information that is currently disclosed, which is information on irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful expenditure, is currently part of the financial statements that gets audited by the Auditor General. What will now happen is that information will now move to the annual report, where the requirements for auditing are very different. So these companies will not get a qualification on an audit opinion only on the basis of non-compliance with PFMA. But if they do other things that are wrong, they will still get a qualification.
They wanted to move to an annual report, but still, as someone who is looking to invest or borrow money to a state-owned entity, I probably just need you to explain to me as a layman how this decision will likely assist, that's what Treasury is basically explaining to us, that the decision will likely assist in making sure that Eskom still has borrowing power. But what investor will give money to an entity that doesn't follow the PFMA and show us every quarter what exactly it's spending its money on?
So the basis for decision-making by the lenders and the rating agencies involves a simple question. And the question is, did you get a qualified audit or not? And if you did get a qualified audit, it immediately triggers particular consequences. What will also happen is that even after the exemption is applied, if somebody wants to lend Eskom money, they will indeed read the audit report, which, if everything else is sorted out, may be an unqualified audit report. But they will also then go and read in the annual report what the annual report says about the recurrence of irregular expenditure. And if they feel that the recurring irregular expenditure, if any materializes, is significant enough for them to decide not to lend to Eskom, then they still won't lend to Eskom. What this exemption simply says is that in the question that simply says, do they get a qualified audit report or not, then there is a reduced likelihood that these entities are going to get a qualification only if they have miscompliance with the PFMA. If they mess up other things, if their financial statements are still not worth the paper they're printed on, they're still going to get a qualification. So it is a speculative process where National Treasury is hoping that these two entities are going to sort out everything else and only have these recurring, these non-compliance with the PFMA as the outstanding issues. And if that's the only problem, then they're not going to get qualified only on that basis. If that happens, it simply means that the lenders, when they ask the question, did you get a qualified audit opinion, the answer will be no. We actually do have an exhibit of how this has worked out. In the 2021 financial statements, Transnet did receive the qualified audit opinion. That immediately triggered the negative clauses in all their lending arrangements. It triggered a downgrade by Moody's. When they received the exemption on the 31st of March last year, they actually then ended up getting a clean audit opinion. So we actually do know that once the exemption has been put in place and an organization sorts out everything else, it does actually move on to a clean audit opinion, which then enables it to be able to negotiate or to have conversations with the lenders and other credit agencies on a much more even footing without the albatross of a qualification hanging over its head.
So this will also bypass the Auditor General's office and laws around that then?
No, it does not bypass the Auditor General's office. What it simply says is that currently, when the Auditor General conducts her audit, she looks at the financial information that is prepared in relation to accounting standards, and she also looks at compliance with PFMA. What the exemption then simply says is that the information relating to PFMA compliance moves away from the first 10 pages of the reporting to the end of the annual report. The significance of that is that that information, wherever it's located, the Auditor General still has to apply her mind and identify if there's any irregular expenses, if there's any issues that still need to be ventilated. She has to apply her mind and distinguish between the matters that emanate from criminal conduct. In other words, if somebody stole money, she still has to say that somebody stole money. But the distinction here is that if the irregularity is on the basis that they did not get 3 quotations, they only got 2, then that irregularity is the type of irregularity that is regarded as a secondary or an ancillary irregularity. So on that basis, she will not qualify them. So the process doesn't actually mean that the Auditor General is going to get bypassed. In fact, it makes her job much more complicated because currently she would simply say you've got 10 items of irregular expenditure and she reports on all of them. What she's now required to do is to distinguish between criminal conduct in those particular 10 transactions and what we call non-compliance with the PFMA conduct in those transactions. And then she has to say these 3 or 4 are simply matters of non-compliance with the PFMA, so therefore we'll put them in the annual report. But these 6 or 7 are evidence of criminality, so therefore I'm going to issue a qualification on the basis of those.
What do you make of the period that Treasury has chosen in this gazette, the financial years that they've chosen to exempt Eskom?
No, the financial years are a matter of a response to a question that National Treasury posed to Transnet about 2 years ago. So when Transnet first asked for the exemption, they said, look, the issues, the historical issues that we found here, we're still trying to understand them, we're still trying to identify who did what, and we're still trying to implement consequence management. Then the secondary question that they were asked is, well, how long will it take for you guys to fix all of these things so that you don't need the exemption? And the answer that Transnet gave was that we need 2 years. So after they had said 2 years, Treasury then said, okay, we're going to give you a 3-year window period. So the exemption is only available for 3 years because in that time, you are being given an opportunity to address these glaring issues relating to historic expenditure. So the 3 years that you're talking about when it comes to Eskom is simply a replica of the answer that was given to Transnet when they asked for the exemption last year. It has nothing to do with the question of who's in charge of the organization today, who might be there tomorrow. It's simply a window period that National Treasury and Transnet agreed on last year, and Eskom is simply getting the same concession.
So basically, Treasury is still saying, as they explained to South Africans what this would mean, saying that it still expects Eskom to take appropriate steps to make sure that there's no fruitless and wasteful expenditure, etc. But, the power utility wasn't able to do this during the time they weren't exempted. So how do South Africans trust that they'd be able to put measures in place now that they've been exempted?
Eskom has a daily and a recurring... Yeah, they've got a recurring duty to ensure that their systems are up to scratch. The reality is that their systems are not there yet. This exemption is not the reason that Eskom systems are not up to scratch. Eskom's inability to put an organization that is fit for purpose is the issue here. So what this exemption simply does is that it gives them breathing space to actually get those things right. But if anyone looks at Eskom's audit report from last year, they will know that the likelihood of Eskom actually dealing with all of these issues within a 12-month period quite simply does not exist. So I expect that at the end of the year, there will still be a qualification on the audit of Eskom on the basis of all the other issues that Deloitte in particular highlighted last year. This exemption only deals with one aspect of it, which is the non-compliance with the PFMA, particularly on historical issues that they inherited. If they decide to still tender in tomorrow, they will still get a qualified audit opinion regardless of the existence of this exemption.
All right, Khaya, thank you so much for helping us make sense of what this would mean in terms of this exemption. Khaya Sithole, an analyst, speaking to us there about what National Treasury gazetted over the weekend, saying that it would exempt Eskom from actually, following the PFMA in some of its financial years.